Care to Chat. Hello and welcome to the Northern Ireland Social Care Council's popular podcast, Care to Chat. I'm Wendy Austin and it's my great pleasure to host these podcasts. Real privilege to hear the stories of social care practitioners and social workers and their clients, and to hear too about the many different and important aspects of the work itself. There's a huge range of situations in which they come into play, from domiciliary care to complex areas like criminal justice, from early years to end of life. This episode looks at social care and carers. No two carers are the same, nor are the needs of any two people receiving care the same. There's an incredible diversity of carers across Northern Ireland from all walks of life and facing different caring challenges. They share a remarkable resilience, dedication and compassion. So we're going to hear from someone who receives care, from a family carer and from care experts, and hopefully we'll shine a light on their experiences. Who cares for them? What kind of support is available? And how much do unpaid carers save the rest of society, often at a personal cost to their health and wealth? With me, Gerard McWilliams. He's from the Participation Partnership in the Northern Ireland Social Care Council, and he receives care himself, but he also volunteers to care for others. Liam Dorrian's a dad with 3 kids with disabilities. They have self-directed care, and we're going to hear from the carer perspective from Liam. Áine Magee is from Carers NI, and Agnes Lunny from Positive Futures. So if I could just start maybe with a pretty obvious question, but it's one that we need to ask. What is care and social care, and who provides it? Áine, you represent 220,000 unpaid carers here in Northern Ireland, so tell us a bit about that.
Care in Northern Ireland is a very diverse thing. So as you said in your introduction there, no two people require the same amount of care, and care can be delivered in lots and lots of different ways. It can be delivered in the home, it can be delivered in a domiciliary care setting, it can be delivered in a nursing care setting, it can be delivered in a hospital setting. And I think whenever we talk about how do carers access support, they access support in a range of different ways. The majority of their day-to-day experiences involve health. They have a deeply intense relationship with health in Northern Ireland, and they are the first people that you talk to whenever you ask, well, how are things in the health service today? Because they know it deeply, they experience it deeply. And for a lot of carers, they experience it on a long length of time. So that could be anywhere between 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 years to a lifetime, whatever it might be. And we know that from our own research across the UK, that Northern Ireland has the highest proportion of carers anywhere in the UK, and also the highest proportion of people delivering 50 plus hours of care every week.
Agnes, your experience in Positive Futures, about the different types of care and the different types of caring roles.
Yeah, it's really interesting you asked the question, how do you define care? And we actually don't have an agreed definition for social care. And the closest we can get is, if you look up what social work is, social work talks about a sort of a professional input, so a professional counselling therapeutic service, and social care will be defined as much more a practical thing, but that loses a huge amount of what the actual social care role is. And today we're talking about social care as opposed to social work. I'm a social worker by trade, by profession, but social care is hugely broad now, and increasingly so. And that's because lots of people who previously wouldn't have had the support, they wouldn't have had the medical advances, didn't live as long, and there weren't so many interventions. But now we have people with really, really complex needs who live at home with their families, as Liam will talk about, but also who have, through medical advances, been able to stay well for longer. So the role of a social care worker is hugely diverse. So we would have some people we support who require maybe 3-to-1 support, so 3 staff, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have others who require a couple of hours a week. That care, as Áine says, can be provided in a number of different ways. But largely in our organisation, the support is provided where the person wants to be supported. And we know from all sorts of research, and we know from all sorts of anecdotal and empirical evidence that people want to be supported by and large at home. So I suppose Áine's talking about the unpaid carers, where in our organisation we have a lot of carers who are paid to care. And again, the numbers are huge. There's about 40,000 people on the social care register at the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. Now, a number of them are social workers, but the vast majority, I think about 33,000, are social care workers.
I said in my introduction that we were going to hear from care experts, among others, which would be Agnes and Áine, but actually, really, I suppose the care experts in this studio are Gerard and Liam, who just are in a different place. Now, Gerard, you volunteer, you help other people, but you receive care yourself. Tell us a bit about how that works for you.
Well, Wendy, just from a service user perspective, I'm going to sort of give you the definition of what I think as what care is and what support is. And in my personal view, by growing up receiving care for a long time since I was born and receiving lots of care and lots of support. So if I can give you a definition of what is care in my personal opinion, and I know Agnes and Áine may differ, but we could agree and disagree. But I think the important thing is to highlight the importance of what is the difference. And the difference is, for me, in terms of care, is receiving care where I'm receiving the care of getting lots of care around medication. And that's going to help me make sure I'm taking the right medication at the right time. Just due to my memory loss, just to give an example of what the care means. And also just to make sure, that I'm safe in my own environment. But also there's an element of like hygiene care and support as well, because I do tend to forget sometimes, and that's the way the world is. So I receive care twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. So I get support in terms of breakfast prompts, in terms of medication in the morning, and in the evening time again I get the support again around medication, but also element around support around maybe washing, for an example, like maybe assisting with the washing machine, for an example, due to some parts of my learning disability, such as reading and writing, and I would tend to get a bit confused. So that is one side of care, is what I think care is about. The other side of the coin is around the support, So I receive support as well. So you have care and you have support. So people may say, does that sound the same, does it? But no, it doesn't really, because, support for me is I'm being supported by my support worker, which I have a support worker who would support me maybe one or two times a week for a number of hours, and that could range from a number of areas. That could range from going shopping. So that means I need assistance with shopping due to my learning disabilities, because of the underlying medical conditions that I have as well. I need to read a lot of menus and need to read a lot of instructions. So that's one element of support. And the other element of support, it could be ranged around budgeting. So maybe helping with reading letters, things are around that. Maybe just reminding me to do things in general as well. So that's an element of supporting someone to be independent in their own home in the community.
Do you look forward to your support worker?
I think it's a very important, it's a lifeline for me, Wendy, and the reason why that is because that's going to help me achieve my everyday living world, if you want, for a better world. It's going to give me the opportunity to maintain independent as best as possible, and to help me grow my confidence, but also to help me empower others as well within the community, because while I'm getting support, then I'm able to support others with my own lived experience.
And you're very generous with your lived experience too. Liam, tell us a bit about your situation. Now, you work with Agnes in Positive Future, so you've kind of got two hats on here, haven't you? You're a professional and you're also a kind of family caregiver.
If you believe in fate, I joined a learning disability organisation 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, we discovered our children had a learning disability. So the two things happened around the same time. I suppose in terms of being a carer, the one thing is there's nobody tells you you're a carer. There's no point or threshold you cross from being a parent to being a carer. I remember during COVID when they said, we have vaccines for carers, but we don't know who the carers are. Nobody has a list, nobody knows where you are. So at some point you transition. What we found, I suppose, difficult is we didn't have a reference point. We had 3 children. We didn't know that what we were doing was different to what other parents were doing. And knowing that you need help and knowing you need support is the first threshold you have to cross.
Is it hard to... I'm interested in that threshold. I mean, is it hard to ask the questions, to ask for that sort of help? If you're an adult and you expect to be able to manage things yourself, but actually, there are things that you just need help with and support.
Yeah, my wife and I were talking about the podcast last night. Make sure I didn't say anything to embarrass her. But one of the things we talked about was... fear of failure. You're a parent, you have children, and yourself, you think, I should be looking after my children. Perhaps it's also a man thing, in the sense of, you're supposed to look after your family. To get to a point where you say, actually, we can't do it on our own, is a difficult thing. But you have to do it, and you have to do it before it's too late. Because if you get into a bad situation and then start asking for help, it's gone too far. So there is that bit, and the children were small, and my wife had friends who were mothers, and their children were small. The differences at that point are less noticeable. They all need fed, they all need changed, they all need washed. We're still doing that 15 years later. The rest of them have moved on. And, our story started, we had twins, they were premature and they missed their milestones, but we thought that's because they're twins, they were premature. And I remember, and probably all people who are carers remember maybe the point they had this conversation. We were in a room with a paediatrician, a speech therapist, a physiotherapist, multidisciplinary meeting, as they would call it. And they were saying this and that and the other. And I could feel they were dancing around the topic slightly. And I said, look, are you saying our children have a learning disability? And 3 of the professionals looked at the floor and one looked us in the eye. And said, it is a distinct possibility. And that, I suppose, was the point we crossed from one to the other. And we went out and sat in the car. So from that point on, we were a carer. And have been ever since.
In Positive Futures, Agnes, your carers support a lot of families like Liam's. That, we're all in tears now, in here, but that tipping point that he's just described there, that must be enormously difficult for people to deal with. And how do your people help families to cope in those kind of situations?
It is hugely difficult, Wendy, hugely difficult. And what I often say to our staff, who I'm very proud to say are amazing people, who care deeply about the role that they have and see it as a privilege to be supporting people. Often my mantra is, just put yourself in the shoes of that family. Most of us have experience of being in a family. We may not all be parents, but most of us have experience of being in a family. And asking yourself, what would I want if I was in that situation? And very often, certainly when we get to know families in the first instance, it is about listening. And we talk about listening in social care and social work, but I would argue we don't really listen. we're so busy wanting to find solutions and answers, and in many cases there are no answers. And families and parents and brothers and sisters want to talk. They want to talk about what it's like for them. Because we talk a lot about what it's like for the person with the disability, but the carer's role is a much, much wider role. And where you have a child or a number of children like Liam has in his family who have a disability, the whole family is impacted. So the work that we would do, we have a number of different types of support, but our families' work that we would do, where we work with families who have probably recently had a diagnosis, those who get a diagnosis, an awful lot of the people who we support who have learning disabilities don't ever get a diagnosis. They're just told they have a learning disability and that's as far as it goes. So it is really a game of trial and error to provide the right support for people. But the key to it, Wendy, and the key to the success of our organisation is that we genuinely listen. We pay 100% attention to what families want. Because you said in your introduction, no two people are the same, no two families are the same, no two approaches. The approach to use with Liam is a different one than you use with me. And that's the key to it. And we talk in our sector and we talk in social work about individualised support and person-centred support. And they've become real cliches. But that is the fundamental part of what a good support package looks like. Finding out what the individual needs and having that person design their support. And that's very often why these things don't work, because we as social workers or professionals think we have the answer. We provide people with a menu on which there is nothing I want to choose. It's like a vegetarian in a steakhouse. You can give me the menu time and time again, but if it's only meat, I'm going to say no.
You want the specials.
I want the specials, or I want something that I need, that I want. And that's what families need. And I think until and unless we actually change the way we work in social care, which is about truly listening to people and enabling them to be in the driving seat, to shape their own support. And that's what we do in our organisation. We listen and then we build a package around the person. So there's no two people in our organisation who get the same support, because people are all different.
Áine, the carers that you represent are the unpaid 220,000, as we mentioned earlier. And I suppose the clue is in the word, actually, isn't it? I mean, they care because they care. And also in some circumstances, because actually, let's be honest about it, they don't have an option. How difficult is that in some situations?
Well, I'm just really struck by Liam's story, and, you know, very privileged, you know, that he's sharing his story today, because that kind of situation, just as you've described, there isn't an option. There isn't a plan B in relation to that. And I think from a Carers NI point of view, there are a whole ream of recommendations that we feel that are applicable to carers overall, and that includes access to respite, access to a break. And whenever we had the pandemic, those short-term respite facilities took a nosedive. And they haven't been fully reinstated yet. And we know that within the Department of Health there are conversations going on around how do we reinstate those, because whenever we spoke to carers, we designed a thing called the Carers' Rights Charter. And we published it about a year ago. And within that are a series of 14 rights that carers should be able to avail of. One of those is the right to a break, having respite. And that's in a short-term capacity as well as a long-term capacity. But particularly short break is one of the key issues at the moment. Because if you are exhausted, if you're at the point of break, you need recharged, you need a chance to reset, and you need a break. And that's one of the other rights that we list in the Carers' Rights Charter, which is your right to a break, but also your right to be treated as an equal in the care of that other person, as well as your ability to have a life and your ability to choose to be a carer. And I think that whenever we talk about the sacrifice that carers give day in and day out, I think everybody knows it these days. I think everybody is slowly waking up to the value of what Northern Ireland's unpaid carers actually do. And I think that there's a recognition. I'm really pleased to see it. And I've worked in the world of primary care and secondary care previously before joining this world of social care. And I'm really pleased to see that social care is rising up the agenda like it never was before. And I think there's huge recognition about the value of social care, social work, social care practitioners and the unpaid carers in Northern Ireland, and how they need a new strategy to support them, because it's not just about your health. It's not just about the health of the person that you're caring for. It's about your own health. It's about your financial security, because we know that roughly half of Northern Ireland's unpaid carers, around 50%, juggle work with caring. And then because the system isn't delivering enough tailored support to those individuals, they find they have to drop their hours. They find they take on a more junior role. And then eventually, because they're so exhausted, they fall out of the marketplace entirely. So that's no good for anybody. To keep carers in work is actually it's a win-win situation for everybody in that circle.
I'm going to come back to Liam in just a moment, but Gerard, I noticed you were nodding furiously when Agnes was talking about the menu and about the importance of the person who's receiving the care having a voice in whatever the package is that I'm mixing my metaphors there, but in whatever you're going to have to eat or whatever's on the menu. How important has that been to you for your voice to be heard in how people help and support you?
Well, Wendy, I think one of the things that I'm going to point out is the importance is don't make decisions for me, is make them with me. Because that's how you're going to understand the individual person's needs, is by asking the question. Just like Liam's point of view is about, communicating, is really, really important. Find out what I really need. Don't be ashamed to ask me. Don't judge. Don't have the authority within your professional to say, OK, this is what we have decided, decide with me, and we will empower each other to make that work. And it's about helping each other. I mean, if you help me, I will help you, because this is how we're going to understand each other. And I think that's really, really important. But the voice itself is really, really paramount. Self-empowerment is really, really, really key. And you really, really do need to listen. And don't be afraid to ask questions, because it's really, really important.
And that's a very interesting point. I mean, does that happen enough? Do you feel you get asked enough questions about what you need, how it's working for you, that kind of thing? Or do people still make what's obviously the mistake of thinking that they know without actually having to ask you yourself?
Well, Agnes, I think that's a good... Maybe I'm the one that may have the confidence to do that, but we may have individuals in the world who might not have the capacity to do that. And I think the hidden voice is really, really important in my eyes, because you really need to make sure that you do not assume that someone is okay with this, this piece of support, where this support needs to be looked at, but it needs to be asked. You need to ask the question, but you need to ask the person the question is really, really important, and yes, there is a long way to go. There is still work to be done, in terms of that person-centred decision making, and it has to be working together.
To go back to Liam, you talked about that very difficult point where you realised that you needed support and help, really. What now would help and support you and your family? I mean, Áine's been talking about the carers charter and the different elements of it. I suppose, we have to recognise that we're living in the real world. Money's tight, and the real world's a pretty scary place at the moment as well. But what either practically or otherwise would actually help and support you and your family?
I think it's important to realise services can't be turned on and off like a tap. I know the Minister announced money for respite and short breaks, but the services didn't exist, and they can't spend the money. As I understand it anyway, the money's there, but the services aren't there. So that long-term planning, that long-term provision of services, and not a sort of a sticking plaster crisis intervention for carers. Because like I say, sometimes it's when people get to a crisis, then they get help. But at that stage, it's too late. I think making sure that people in services, whatever, and like George and other people saying, is that there's a menu of services. So when we talk about respite, for example, and this is just me and my wife's personal choice, we don't want residential respite. We don't want to drive our kids to a building and drop them off. What we would like is people to come into our house and we'll go away. I'm quite happy to go to a hotel or somewhere for a couple of days, but you can support them in their house. And through Positive Futures, there's lots of short break. There's shared lives services. There's other services like that. Residential short break has a place, absolutely. But it's making sure there's that choice for people, because like we said the whole way through, no two care is the same. And
it's not a one size fits all. Yeah.
So those are some of the things. And in some ways, we have wonderful support sometimes from professionals, but sometimes I want them to get out of my way. Sometimes we talk about self-directed support as being social worker-directed support, and you need permission. And it's that sense of, well, can I not make a judgment? Can I not make a call on how this package is used? Oh, no, but you can only use it for these particular things. Okay. Now, sometimes we've done stuff with social workers and said, can we use it for this and can we use it for that? And they've come back and we make a case and they said, yes, but you have to ask permission. Now, I know people say the public purse and money, and you don't want to appear in newspapers, say the health service is paying for X and Y and blah, 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 and there has to be some parameters. But that sense of we are there to support you to choose the support. And like Gerard says, when he is a support worker, he gets to choose how that's delivered. And rather than a prescriptive list, a framework that you can work within. And that requires professionals to let go. Mm-hmm. And that requires trust from both sides, but from the carer and the commissioner, to say, I'm going to give you, in our case, money, and we're going to trust you that you're going to use that to get the support you need. So those sorts of things, and creativity, what worked 10 years ago, what worked 5 years ago, doesn't work now. Technology is moving on apace. How does that link in with supporting carers? For example, we used some of our money to buy an iPad because for our children, to help them de-escalate, an iPad works well. So it's not always about throwing another body at it and saying, well, that person needs 3 staff, that person needs 2. That person might need 1 staff, but actually they might need an iPad as well because that works for them, and equipment and things like that. So all of those things. But I'd say the big thing, like Gerard touched on it and Agnes touched on it, that the professionals have time to sit with the carer and the family to work this out. Yeah. I would say at the minute we don't have a social worker because of the vacancies and all of those kind of things. So we would call the duty social worker, and they're responsive and they're great. But in terms of somebody in the commissioner who knows our family and understands our situation, I doubt that there is anybody with that depth. And it's not what the social workers want either, but it's the situation in terms of resource and things like that.
Yeah. I'm going to ask all of you this, but if there are people listening to this, maybe someone who is realising that they might need care for themselves or for a family member for the first time, what would you advise them to do? Gerard, let me start with you on that.
Well, I think the first thing that I would say is, Wendy, is don't be ashamed to ask for help, because that is really, really key. Speak to your health profession, or speak to a friend who, if you need someone to speak up for you, who may be able to maybe give you direction to maybe link into the community and voluntary sector, where there's lots of support out there. Again, we mentioned Carers NI, we've mentioned other support, maybe other supported organisations. Even we mentioned Positive Futures, Advice NI, So, just don't be afraid to ask for help and take that plunge and go for it.
Agnes, that's excellent advice from Gerard. Mm-hmm. And what would you say to add to that?
Yeah, I think Gerard's absolutely right. I think it's really difficult to ask for help, and I think Liam has described that very, very clearly. I think also don't be afraid to ask for help, but ask for the help early.
Yeah.
And I think what happens in a lot of situations is families feel that it's their responsibility. It's up to them to care for their sons and daughters. And they do that at a huge cost to themselves, to their health, to their wealth, to their mental health and so on. And by the time they ask for help, they're in crises. And that's a very, very difficult situation for all concerned. And I'm a great believer that prevention is better than cure. And I think we're not good at accepting that prevention actually is the key to a lot of this. And I think we have, for a number of reasons, and I'm guessing finance being one of them, is we have allowed our system to become a crisis-led system as opposed to a needs-led system. And I think we need to now concentrate. If we want to see change in social care, which we do, and there are a number of different strategies in place, there's a number of different fora, including the Social Care Collaborative Forum and so on, that's looking at how do we reform social care. I think we've got to have absolutely front and centre there has got to be how do we actually resource prevention, because it is by far the cheapest, the most effective, and what families want and what individuals want. The other bit of it is we need to make sure that we keep opportunities in the community alive. So we think about social care workers. Without social care workers, we don't have the kind of structures that's needed. But Liam also talked about assistive technology. I think we've got to understand that we have paid workers, but we also have volunteers. We have assistive technology. We have communities. And I think we have a role as well to educate communities, to be able to support all of their citizens, to create opportunities where people feel welcome, feel valued, feel part of communities. So the diversity of support that could be generated if we just thought differently about it. But the role of social care is critical, and it's going to get even more so. We know that, we look at the census, we look at the demography, we know that we're going to need more and more and more social care workers. And my experience in social work and in social care, all of my professional life it is an absolute privilege. I feel privileged in doing the job that I do. I hear our staff talk about the privilege. I spoke to a man the other day, he used to be in the police, who now works for us, and he said, I can't believe that I'm getting paid to do this. It's just such a privilege. So I think that out there, the message that I would want to give is have a go at it, because it is so diverse. Social care is so diverse. Have a go at it, and the difference that you're going to make in your own life, but more importantly, the lives of the people you're providing that support for, is huge.
Áine, just to put that same question to you, and what you could maybe add to what Agnes and Gerard have been saying, for anyone listening who might be realising that they need some assistance at the moment, what do they do? Apart from getting in touch with carers anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I think, and Liam actually touched on it, it's about understanding that moment whenever you realise I'm providing care here, and it's not just a normal level of care. This is all consuming, and I'm struggling now with my own mental health. I'm struggling about where to go. I think your GP very much is probably one of your first points of contact. I've actually, we had a conversation recently with the Royal College of GPs in Northern Ireland. They do collect information around individuals who are carers, and they explain that whenever the ideal situation is that whenever you present and you're maybe talking about the person that you care for, that they have the training and the holistic perception that they're going to treat you as a whole person. They're not just going, you're not just going there to say, look, my son or daughter or whoever has this particular condition. They're going to say, well, what about you? So I would say that do speak to your GP for definite. But what I will say as well is that there is still, and it's an unfortunate thing, but some people still don't like to declare themselves or self-identify as a carer because they just do it anyway. This is just what I do. I juggle being a parent carer with caring. I work and I juggle and I care. In relation to the people that are being cared for, our own survey showed around 40% of carers are caring for someone who is elderly, around 30% are caring for a child and around sort of 20% then around for a sick spouse. And so we're talking about, whenever we're talking about caring, we're talking about children's services, we're talking about adult services, we're talking about elderly services. So I would first of all encourage anyone to self-identify, get yourself onto the register, and then that's whenever the door opens then to a carers assessment. And ultimately a carers assessment is meant to open up a conversation about what exactly you need. And I know that this is, I mean, Agnes is shaking her head. Absolutely. I understand the challenges within it, but there are pathways. Do they work effectively and holistically and completely and across the piece? Are all trusts compliant? Are all trusts offering them? Are they re-offering carers assessments? No, they're not. So, for example, I think within 2022 to 2023, around 15,000 carers assessments were offered to people in Northern Ireland for the first time. 8,000 people accepted them and 7,000 said no. Whenever they were approached again, would you like, the 7,000, would you like to come back and let's have a conversation about what we can do to support you? Around 4,000 said yes. So there is a value, there is a system, but I also know that everyone involved in this at a strategic level understands that we could do much, much better around what does a carers assessment look like and what can it deliver. Because if a carers assessment understands that you're stressed out, and we know that carers are stressed out, and they're saying, well, you need a break, but there's no break available, then what is the point? Because what is the value then? So, I think that for me, anyone who is about to start this journey of being a carer, or maybe has finally realised I am a carer, I definitely would encourage you to take that step forward, because, as Agnes said, early intervention is far, far better than something where you're hitting the wall, it's crisis point, and everything is just so, so difficult.
Liam, you talked as well about the importance of being timely in seeking help, asking at the right moment before it gets to the point where you're demented, really. But you also talked about the technological advances and so on, and the iPad, which has been helpful with your children and so on. When you look to the future, how do you see the caring role in the future?
In terms of people who provide care, I suppose the thing about the carers we have, I guess they're all young, and they're closer to my children's age than I am, and even things like social media and things like that, and that social engagement, they work really well with the children, because some of them were teenagers not so long ago themselves, and things like phones and technology. The caring, I don't think the core of it will change too much. The core of it about caring for somebody else, anticipating their needs, and so on and so forth. The nuts and bolts of how you do that might be slightly different, and the tools that you use might be slightly different. But even if you are an older person, you think about going into care, you don't need to have to know about iPads. But do you know people? Mm-hmm. My non-verbal cues are so much better now than they ever were, because the two of my children are non-verbal. But do you understand people? Can you tell when they need help? Can you tell how they want help, and those sorts of things? And are you a caring person? In terms of the point that people maybe want to ask for care, there's a few things I would say is for us it was transformative. Maybe not at the time we started, but by the time we get to now, we wouldn't have been able to survive without the carers that we've got. And not all our care comes from paid carers. We've some wonderful family and friends and neighbours, and sometimes they're waiting to be asked. And if you haven't asked them, and you're struggling on your own, they just want you to say, would you help? And so don't be afraid to say to people. Some of them might not help, but you may have neighbours, or you may have friends or family who want to help. And the other thing I was going to say was, unfortunately, don't be passive. If you're expecting that once you put yourself out there that the care will suddenly flow towards you, that's not the case. And it's difficult when you're in that caring role and it's a very busy day that you have, whatever, but you do have to pick up that phone and talk to social workers or GPs or people. Go online, find resources. You have to fill out forms and you have to do stuff. It doesn't come to you easy. So don't worry about it, but just if you cross that and you think, right, I'm going to out tomorrow and I'm going to reach out for care, there's more work, unfortunately. But once you get there, you will realise it was all worth it.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, Liam. And thank you, Gerard, too, and Agnes and Áine. We've been having a conversation about caring, and it's been a real privilege to hear from all of you today. This is the Care to Chat podcast for the Northern Ireland Social Care Council. There's more information online. There are lots of organisations that you can get in touch with, and if you go onto the NISCC website, there'll be links there to assist you. Now, there'll be more podcasts released throughout the coming weeks, so to be sure you don't miss one, please do subscribe. They are free, by the way. Wherever you get your podcasts, please rate us and, of course, tell all your friends and colleagues.